Firstly, just as a bit of a brief personal background to where I've come from, as Bill said, farmer or father's son from Southern Cross, third generation, and predominantly wheat and barley and cattle or Brahman stud. I now work, or last 12 months I've worked 60% for the Department of Agriculture in Merredin, doing solely this concept, and it's been quite enjoyable having a parallel sort of occupation or job down the research roles, which I've thoroughly enjoyed and look forward to where it may lead. As to the concept, it's pretty simplistic. 18 months ago it was no more than really an idea in my head, so it's come a long way. It was quite a proof of concept season. It was very rough and rigorous. We didn't delve into too much scientific data, but I can present to you what we have today. The project was a collaboration between myself and my father's farm in Southern Cross, Glen Riethmuller, my project manager in Merredin, Tim Setter and Ned Barrett-Leonard. Firstly, I just want to explain to you how the concept all came about. I went away to boarding school for 5 years, and in my holidays I'd return back to Southern Cross and see the continuation of prolonged drought and the heartache that it caused, and I knew to myself that I wasn't going to settle for that. So briefly, as an overview, I did a really radical concept, one that you can't implement, and as I said, I was literally the age of 16 years, and at home I did 40 square metres of black plastic covered interrow at 25-inch spacing with 20 inches of black plastic. I sowed it to 80 kilos of seed and 80 kilos of fertiliser. I did a control crop next to it with our actual own seeder bar, and the control crop was sub 0.4 tonne to the hectare. It was a almost decile 1 drought, and it was about 120 to 130 mils of growing season rain. Now the 40 square metres with black plastic, 25-inch spacing, paired row, yielded 4.5 tonne to the hectare. And at 16 years of age, I thought, righto, the old neighbour over the fence, he can say whatever he likes about the district and it's all in cycles. He may be true, but my understanding is that it's not that it doesn't rain enough, it's just our efficiency is not adequate to keep sustainability, which what we have done for the last 60 years out there, but are running out and got to do something about it. So that was a bit of a pivotal point for me being back on the farm, and that's how this concept came about. And as much as I'd love to run black plastic over 20,000 acres, I think my father wouldn't really appreciate that, but what we can do is we can simulate that somewhat, which is what we got the photo here of, and it's compacting the interrow into 2 linear faces with this press wheel to create water harvesting. And what I will continue on to say is it is a system and it's not just an implement, and it's something that once if commercialised, it's something that each farmer is going to have to assess individually with their own paddock, their own system, their own operation, because they'll be very differently between fences. Basically, the treatments that we had last year, we had plot trials in Merredin Research Station and Southern Cross on the family farm, and they comprised, you have to forgive me, I've spent too much time with my old man, I still talk in imperial. We got 9, 12, 15 and 18 inch spacings at Merredin and Southern Cross plot trials, and the whole reason we went out to 15 and 18 inch was the theory, well rather everybody knows there's a yield penalty for the wider rows because competition between plants for moisture. The catch-22 with this concept, and has never been researched before to my knowledge in dryland grain in the country, is that the wider the row, the greater the water harvesting. And that's why the broadacre trial, which we conducted on a family's farm, which isn't listed actually here, unfortunately, but we went out to 15 inch and we could make make the easy decision of going out to 15 inch, one of the first in the district, because we knew we could get that extra water harvesting that we wouldn't on the narrow rows. and we're comprised predominantly of heavy red soil, and it's something that we could figure would work into our system. The broadacre trial itself was on a 44-foot flexi coil, and as I said, it was a collaboration between the department and our farm. So we did the broadacre designated trial, and we also ran it over 1,500 acres of our program. When I approached the department to help with the research and funding for a broadacre trial, I said to them, it's a system, it's not going to be just an implement. And I cannot stand next to a 2 metre plot in September at a spring field day and with such a radical but logical concept and then tell the farmer standing next to me, righto, you can go do that on your 10,000 hectare cropping program. They will laugh at me. So that's how I said it's that stepping stone. And yes, it's a quick stepping stone to do a broadacre trial in the first year, but I told them in the position that the Yilgarn Shire, or rather Southern Cross, is in, and many of the other Eastern District shires, they're not in a position to wait, the good part of 10 or 15 years to get results out there, because there won't be farmers out there when it comes to that. And that's one of the beauties about this concept, is opposed to gene research, which will take 10 to 15 years to get a result. This is a management practice which you can get results within 12 months. The trial details between Merredin and Southern Cross are pretty straightforward. We did approximately 1 tonne yield estimate for Southern Cross and 2 tonnes for Merredin, roughly. It is noted fairly high rates of fertiliser, but given those yield expectations, that's what was required. Fairly conventional practices with glyphosate and Secura. We also ran a herbicide trial in the broadacre area, and as I'll explain later on, but we never had significant rainfall events to wash any pre-emergent chemical into the furrow, so the data was non-existent. One of the whole ideas of the concept for the initial year is what we call forming up. And having said that, I will go back, and I will continue to go back to the idea of it being a system. Now, the system is ideally coupled straight to RTK auto steer, accurate to an inch, and we've got the belief that we want to repeat our furrows. And I found myself saying quite a few times that instead of farming in the eastern or central to eastern districts, instead of farming, say, 100% of your topsoil, which most farmers are doing, let's farm 50 or 70% of our topsoil and do it really well by repeating our furrows year in, year out. And that's even more so increased on the wider rows by doing water harvesting and concentrating all your organic matter, your nutrients, biological activity into this one little, what we call lolly bag strip, and repeat that. Let's farm that little strip out the furrow really well, and then never run a tine implement in the interrow again, which will aid to the concept of compacting our interrow for that water harvesting and water shedding. Now, with the forming up, obviously it depends on every farmer's system that they've got in place. Because it was the first year, we decided that we need to harvest the opening season rain, which is one of the benefits of the concept, by going into last year's furrows. Obviously we didn't have that, so back in April we got the cone seeder out and started forming up so we could do exactly that, harvest the opening season rain. Unfortunately we didn't have any summer rainfall that we could form up on, which would be ideal, which would aid to crusting, so we did go in and form up dry. You can see the different spacings there. We have 18 inch, which is quite wide, not overly conventional for the WA Wheatbelt. You can see those 2 linear faces, ideal for water harvesting. We also managed to get our hands on a rainfall simulator from Paul Blackwell in Geraldton, and this was quite interesting to use. I had to do a bit of work on it, but it was served its purpose nonetheless. And we could just basically form up a few strips and get an idea of what sort of water harvesting capabilities we can get. And you can see by this photo here, we're starting to get some puddling. I'm going to answer a question that's no doubt going to be asked in 15 minutes time, and that's what happens in the event of a high or a large rain, and you'll see exactly that, the puddling of the water. You can see there's almost next to no stubble load there in that photo, and as there was, I think it was fire harrowed, Glen. But what we did notice is that even a single bit of stubble that wasn't burnt would bridge across the furrows and would actually dam up. Now, I'm not going to disclaim this because I'll get my fingers burnt, but if the concept, I believe, with stubble retention, if the concept is going to run water, well then it's going to run water conventionally across your paddock. So having said that, we haven't done the R&D to find out what's going to happen in 50 mils of rain in 2 hours, which in a summer thunderstorm. But yeah, we can only gauge. As I said, it was a very proof of concept season, and there's a lot. There's a list as long as my arm of different scenarios that I'd like to try. Seeding was middle of May. Wasn't overly ideal as we got a good season break, Anzac weekend. However, I got stuck on a seeder for the old man and made it a bit difficult to be in 2 places at once. You can see, actually I'll go back, you can see conventional here at 9-inch spacings, the just knife points press wheels and how rough and lumpy the image looks behind the cone seeder. So that area there actually has a greater surface area than my experiment, because of all the lumps and whatnot and how it's been turned up. So it's going to be exposed to more evaporation because of hence the greater surface area, and it's almost going to be exposed to, it's going to take more to wet up. So whereas if I go to the next photo, you can see those 2 linear faces, nice hard pressed rolled on the interrow. We also leave a 3-inch gap between the wheels. One of the ideas is that because most modern day implements have a tine assembly with a seed boot and whatnot on it, and usually their own press wheel, and we didn't want to interfere with that. We thought, let's just keep it simple, keep the gap and not interfere with anything like that. And it's worked very well. One of the issues we did come across was there was actually pushing soil on top of the furrow and deepening the seed depth, and we were tearing our hair out at the time, but we just lifted the boots up, and it actually worked out quite well because we could put a nice firm seed bed around the seed that was only this deep, and then we could put that amount of soil, again of loose dirt, to stop the evaporation, which is some of the work that Glen Riethmuller has done previously. So it worked out actually to be a bit of a benefit to put that loose dirt on the top, stop crusting and stop the evaporation as a blanket layer. That's the 375 mil row spacing that's actually been retrofitted onto our flexi coil, and you can see on there we've actually got scrapers. They were, as I said, a still R&D stage. They were just 5 mil mild steel, and on across 1,500 acres we certainly wore them out. And yeah, we're now sourcing tungsten tile or tungsten carbide tile leading edge on the scrapers just to get some wear resistance. And we believe that it may become an issue that you replace them like you replace your points on your seeder or something like that. We're not aware of it just yet, but we'll see how many acres we can get out of it this coming season. One of the treatments that we also did at Merredin and Southern Cross was alternate rows, which was hinted to us from Paul Blackwell. He's done a little bit of research on it up in Geraldton, and the whole concept is still on the 9 and 12-inch spacings and getting that water harvesting, but only sowing every second row. So the skipped row will water harvest and store moisture into the interrow, which will aid with late grain fill. And it's something that's definitely of notable mention, as you'll see later on in the slides with the yield results. This here was at Merredin trial site at 15-inch spacing. It was post-rainfall event of about 48 hours, and we had, I think, 2 lots of 11 mils of rain. And you can see the two, by the indication of the colour of the soil, you can see there's two banks up here of moisture, which goes down 3 inches here and 3 inches here, and you've hit dry dirt, and that hasn't been tilled for many years. We ran the knife point down in here, and we've got up to 8 inches of moisture down in the furrow. So we're literally stealing our moisture from here, whacking it down into there and storing it, and we'll start asking ourselves, instead of where do we want the moisture, we're saying where do we want the dry dirt. And basically we want these 2 big dry banks of soil, hard pressed soil up here and up here. That's going to use as a blanket layer and protection from the sun and evaporation. So it all comes down to the water efficiency. This here, we've got the soil moisture post-rainfall event, and what we've got is the control and the experiment, and we've literally stolen that moisture from the interrow here and slapped it up the top here. So that's the benefit that we're getting. Plant establishment at Merredin was relatively similar across the treatments, so we're reasonably happy with that. Yield treatment at Merredin, unfortunately we don't have a 300 mil control. We stuffed that up unfortunately, but what you can see is a little bit of a bell curve in your conventional. But what we've achieved with the experiment is we've actually got a higher increase in yield on the wider rows. So all the research that's been conducted over the years on furrow widths obviously hasn't been done with press wheels and has sort of pushed us away from the wider rows. And now, we got a 26% increase in yield at 460 mil spacing. So that was quite something to achieve, and we're pretty happy with that. You can see the alternate rows which Paul Blackwell suggested. They turned out reasonably well as well. Plant establishment at Southern Cross was quite reasonable, bar the 375 mil spacing control. We had a bit of an issue with our tines not digging for that treatment. It was our first treatment, and it was to be disregarded. Yields at Southern Cross, unfortunately, post seeding, we never had one significant rainfall event to settle the interrow. This will aid with crusting and getting that water harvesting. We never got that. For the 3 months of winter, we didn't have a rainfall event over 6 mils. And even for Southern Cross, that's unheard of. By the time the rains did come in middle September, we already had grain fill, and thus we didn't get hardly any water harvesting. So unfortunately, Murphy's Law paid me out on it last year. So we're glad we got the multi-trial sites nonetheless. Rainfall, as I briefly discussed, you can see here Southern Cross, June 9.6 mils, August 5.8. You can't do much when it doesn't rain, but you can do something when it does. So for the growing season, we've got 140 mils at Southern Cross and 212 at Merredin. Key messages: peak, smooth edged, compacted interrows, soil profiles can increase in-row soil water capture if suitable and rain events occur. And at Merredin, yield did increase at all row spacings, comparing furrow formation with standard knife points and press wheels, but was not statistically different at the 5% level. And the concept needs testing more on soil types to assess the rainfall event amounts. Row spacing or total rainfall is important for yield improvements. To the acknowledgements of the DAFWA, when I first approached them, they were pretty keen on the concept, and I understand it was not a conventional way about sourcing funding, but they really came to the party, and I'm very thankful for that. To Steve Kosh for the cone seed out of Geraldton, a lot of people had a small role in the project, and without any of them, it just would not have happened. And the technical officers, Cameron Wild, Trevor Bell and Larry Prosser, they helped us out when I had my bum sitting on a cedar or something like that for the old man. So, also, and more importantly, to Glen Riethmuller, my project manager. He ended up spending a lot more time than first anticipated on the project, and without him I wouldn't even have a chance of standing here today. So Glen, stand up. if you're going to make me stand up here, well, I'll make you stand up as well. But no, I'll forever be in debt to him with the work that he's given me, so for that I'm truly appreciative. And to Tim Setter and Ed Barrett-Leonard, who haven't been here, they've helped me out with some of the statistical and work that's gone in behind it, and the processing. So thank you very much, Tim.